How James Clear's Atomic Habits book helped me enjoy Jiu-Jitsu a lot more the past year. This is your Jiu-Jitsu Uncle Dave, and let's cover this topic in this episode of JitsChat. And as I stated in the opening, I want to attribute this episode to the book Atomic Habits. And it's pretty popular for God knows how long, I don't know. But if you haven't read it yet, there's tons of videos here on YouTube, Spotify that summarizes it. And if you have a chance to borrow and read the book, it's really well worth your time, regardless of where you want to apply it. In a nutshell, the book is all about cultivating habits rather than just setting broad goals to make lifetime and dramatically impactful and sustainable improvements in your life. And when I first read that book, probably like 3-4 years ago, I read it with a mindset of just general reading. I do like reading nonfiction, psychology, and learning type of content. And I was just reading it without really thinking about the practical application of it to my own life. And then a couple of years later, I just want to reread it because I forgot about a lot of it other than the main point. And a couple of years later, I listened to the audiobook just to have a refresh without having to read the whole thing again. I was doing it from a context of work, from professional setting. And I once again started listening to the book about 9 months to a year ago. And I realized it has helped me so much in terms of how I enjoy Jiu-Jitsu and how I learn Jiu-Jitsu more. A big part of the book is about the relative vagueness and inefficacy of just setting goals. There's a lot of context in that book, a lot of examples in that book that focus on sports. One was from the British cycling team. The other one was the San Antonio Spurs basketball team, wherein James Clear mentioned that setting goals is important and all, but it's relatively a meta view of what you want to do. It's the end result of it, wherein there's nothing unique about it for yourself. So for example, in Jiu-Jitsu, you might say, I want to win the next IBJJF or the next ADCC, whatever. I want to take gold in the next tournament that I'm joining in a month. Guess what? Everybody else who joins that tournament have the exact same goals. Nobody enters the tournament thinking, oh, I'm going to go there to lose. What makes a difference between those who achieve their goals or not is in the systems. It's in what they do to reach that goal. The goal itself kind of takes care of itself for the most part once you have a system in place. And that system is the most crucial part if you look at almost all top-level athletes, or even those who seem to have quote-unquote overnight success or suddenly came up in the scene, in the arena. It's never an overnight success. It's a culmination of a lot of intentional and small habits that led to that result. And for a lot of hobbyists or non-full-time practitioners, we actually don't address this in a sustainable fashion, considering the fact that the top-level guys, regardless of sports, regardless of expertise, spend tremendous amount of time to hone that skill, to be able to piece that big macro puzzle result together after years of experience. They didn't go from having a 2,000-piece puzzle and then magically just create the finished product because they wanted to. It wasn't because of short-term procrastinating type of forced practice that allowed them to reach that goal. It's their years and reps process of failing in discovering what works for them in minute details and by isolation doesn't really mean much, that eventually everything pieces together and it just clicks. So going back to the puzzle example, I'm not a jigsaw puzzle guy, but I've watched enough anecdotes that talk about this, that there are patterns into most jigsaw puzzles. And actually a lot of commercial jigsaw puzzle brands, they use only like 2 or 3 templates to stamp and cut the pieces together. The image itself is relatively irrelevant once you know the pattern of the mold stamp itself. And again, those things take a lot of experience as to knowing which pieces belongs to the edges, which pieces belong in the corner, which ones are most likely to be the confusing pieces. And experts at doing those puzzles will know what to prioritize and eventually turn the easy ones into muscle memory or mental memory that they don't even have to think about. Translating that into Jiu-Jitsu, it's the same thing. We have a lot of foundational moves, sequences, body movements that once you become more advanced, you don't think about it that much. And you realize how unnatural those motions are in reality when you try to teach somebody new on how to do certain things that seem basic. For you, it seems like, oh, you just do this, you just do that. You step here, you pose that. But simple things like what a stiff arm is, it's not very intuitive for somebody who's never done it, as opposed to somebody who relies on it day in and day out during training. Those little things that we experience in training, from where to put our weight, sensing where the weight is coming, so that we can get out of it, knowing when to move us versus moving our partner, whether we have moved our center of gravity to the most beneficial location so that we can execute the technique that we want to do. All those things are easily taught from a conceptual point of view, but it's never easy to execute unless you have that sensory awareness of it. On to how the book has helped me. About probably a few months before, again, I spent Blue for, I don't know, like 6-7 years probably, with 2-year gap, probably around 5 years at Blue. And it took me a while to get back into it because I reset it after COVID. And by that time I was like 47 already at that time. It was hard for me to remember everything that I knew before, even though if you talk about certain things, I know what it is, but executing it, especially with resistance, was totally a different idea. A few months after that, when I got more regular training back, I got the groove back, I decided to try the atomic habit approach of just improving a little bit of things daily in every single training that I do. And it doesn't mean that I'm going to quote unquote nail this. I'm going to perfect this in X number of sessions. No, it's literally a small thing like making sure my knee is pointing a certain way when I'm playing half guard, making sure that I'm not rolling my wrists so that my stiff arm frame doesn't get compromised, preventing cross faces, stopping people from connecting their hands, or me putting the right weight placement on somebody's end of lever for control and pinning and all those things. Little, extremely small things. And I usually focus one whole session on just like 2 or 3 of those little things. I don't really drill or try to learn a whole move sequence until I understand those little nuances. I'll try it and then I'll figure out what makes that move efficient or work. And I only focus on that tiny thing for probably around 6 months. I wasn't really seeing a big macro improvement as to the success rate of me hitting those certain specific move sequences. But again, this is different for everybody based on how fast or slow you learn. But for me, at least, typically it takes me around 4 to 6 months to get something. And then around 3 months, to be honest, to get those small details into my system. And then another 2-3 months to incorporate it into a move sequence or something part of my game. With the help of my training partners, as well as that keeping true to that improving just 1% every day, or in this case, 1% every training session, after like 9 months to a year or so, things kind of just clicked. Like all of a sudden, I have a decent guard, not just for defensive purposes, but also for offensive purposes. Things that I never thought would be part of my game when I was still younger, when I was still in white belt, blue belt, because I always thought that my legs are too short, I'm not flexible enough, and all that jazz, all those beliefs, because I was overwhelmed with the moves themselves and not getting better at small things. And after a while, there comes the realization that a lot of moves feed off the same core principles. I'll give you an example in sticking to the stiff arm thing, right? One of the more common application of a stiff arm, especially if you're in guard, is posting on the cross shoulder, on the far side cross shoulder to prevent people from crushing you, especially like in the half guard or open guard or something like that. Yes, that is true. If you're trying to learn that simply for that sequence or for that position, you might get good at it. But if you learn the habit of just like stiff arming and posting your opposite arm and shoulder in line so that you can generate the maximum fulcrum transfer, the weight transfer, then you realize that you can use the exact same movement for Heisman escapes, for side control pin reversals, for even like reversing turtle, for escaping north-south from the bottom. All of those things just come from the simple idea of having the small habit of locking your elbows, dropping your traps to engage your lat and keeping a stiff wrist. All of those things are minute little sensory training changes that took time for me to get used to the point right now that when I decide to be preemptive, to do any form of bottom distance management, the sequence of dropping my lats, engaging my traps, aligning my left and right arms to a straight line and all that stuff has become more and more natural. It's no longer something that I have to think about, like, oh, I have to do this, I have to do that. That's such a simple, basic move. It's nothing advanced. Even for the same thing like T-Rex arms, keeping your elbows to your ribs, it is elbow-knee connection. All of those things come from tiny and progressive habits. Being able to do all of those things and see those little progress instead of just like aiming for one goal that, oh, in X month, I'm going to be great at doing headquarter passing, whatever. That's such a difficult and deflating goal to have a lot of times, especially if you're a hobbyist, because the odds of you being really good at being a specialist at that specific move is quite low, especially against higher level guys. There will always be somebody better than you, not just in the comp, but even in your gym. Being able to improve things like awareness of weight placement and knowing when you're going to get off balance, knowing when your spine is no longer in maximal structure advantage Things like that are such tiny, tiny, even immeasurable or non-visible improvements that adds up tremendously, and it will stay with you for the rest of your jiu-jitsu journey. It's not like you're learning a trick. It's not like you're learning something that is new right now, that is a new meta right now, that is catching everybody off guard. But 9, 10 months down the road, somebody at the pro circuit will find a counter to it, and all of a sudden it's no longer as useful, and you have to redo your game plan and start learning something new again. That might be applicable for top level athletes because obviously they're competing against roughly the same bunch of people all the time. It's a copycat system. It's a copycat league, as all sports are. But for personal growth perspective, focusing on little things that can add up and that you can use on across the board has made jiu-jitsu a lot more fun for me because I'm no longer seeking an endpoint every time I go train. That's why I don't mind and actually like it when I go to the gym and just be somebody's grappling dummy, and I'll only be doing something specific without cues, meaning I tell them that I'm just gonna, for example, like I'll let them start from side control or mount, and I will fail a lot of times. I'll just tell them to go ham and submit me any way they want. And my goal is just to either defend the entire round, escape, or achieve a sweep or whatever that might be without any specific context. They can get off mount. It doesn't really matter. I want to learn the sensory experience, and I want to see the pattern of people on when they do transitions, when they do their weight shifts, when do they decide to abandon control to go for attack, and all those kind of things. And every training session makes it very, very challenging and rewarding. And it also allows me to progressively change the difficulty of that same objective just by switching partners, adding more ecological approach to it, meaning putting more constraints, starting from a much deeper submission scenario, for example, or picking bigger partners, stronger partners that you know that are good at certain things, and I'll still be able to do the same thing. The compounding benefits of those little things far outweigh the massive info dump of a short session or short duration training. In a way, that's a big reason why I don't attend a lot of seminars when top level guys visit or other instructors hold seminar sessions. It's not because I don't find them useful. It's more of the fact that if it's not already part of my game, if it's not already part of my system, if it's not part of the stuff that I'm trying to get better at, I have a hard time retaining the information. As cool as it is to learn something fancy that straight from the source of expertise, if it's not something I'm going to be able to use almost immediately or at least comprehend at a much deeper level, I don't get it. Like whether it's seminar or instruction, I have a hard time to retaining that information. I can watch it and understand all of it, but not all of it, sorry, but I can understand enough of it, but it doesn't mean that I can integrate it to what I'm learning, to what I'm capable of as well at this point of my training. Just to give you an example, one of the first instructionals I bought as a white belt 12, 15 years ago, I don't know, was Stefan Kesting's video with Emily Kwok on how to beat bigger and stronger people. I mean, from a product title alone, that resonates so much for me as a smaller person and as an older person. So I bought it. As you know, Stefan's products are really, really well made, even back then, really well explained and beginner friendly. I always like to learn from female instructors because I feel that their body size and their mindset fits beginners better than competitors, especially if you're a little older. I loved how Emily teaches, and she was extremely clear, it was extremely insightful, and it was easy to follow. But that DVD talked about primarily a Marcelo Garcia system of butterfly guard, single leg X, X passing, and those kind of things, which I saw it, I tried practicing it, but I could never pull any of those things off because so many little minute details such as weight shifting, where to clamp, when to sweep, all of those things, even though it was explained, it's hard to do without ample mat time, without understanding the minutiae of why certain things work. Honestly, it took me until like blue belt before I understood how to play butterfly fundamentally and how single leg X to X guard works. That is the challenge when you're trying to learn something big rather than build your own little system. I hope that you give a systems-based micro 1% improvement change approach a try. It might help you get out of or completely prevent hitting plateaus in your training. And again, if you haven't read the book, give it a shot. James Clear, Atomic Habit. If you're not a reader, just go to audiobooks. There's a lot on YouTube. Listen to it at 1.5 speed. You should breeze through it in an hour or so. I hope that helps out everyone who feels overwhelmed in terms of learning jiu-jitsu. Whenever you feel like you're not doing enough or you feel like you're not improving, perhaps take a step back and look at the small things that you have accomplished and the things that has slowly become muscle memory and sensory muscle memory, or things that you feel that you don't have to think about anymore and it's part of your game, no matter how small, such as like being able to sit upright, frame, not getting crushed, and all those things. Celebrate every little one of those achievements and go from there. Try to get better with all of those things that you have already achieved instead of trying to either A, copy somebody else, or B, trying to go too far too fast. And that's all I have for you today. And I'm at the gym now. Until the next episode, Jiu-Jitsu Uncle out. Have a good day. Bye.